Hello, YouTube. At the very beginning of the space age, no one really knew how weightlessness affected the human body. Yes, the first space flights showed that in the absence of gravity, you can live for several days without harm to your health. But will cosmonauts, as we call the astronauts in the USSR, be able to stay in orbit for several weeks or months? Is there any safe limit? There were no answers to these questions. Long before the flight of the very first artificial satellite of the Earth, researchers and science fiction writers proposed a solution to the problem of weightlessness in space. They proposed designs for spacecraft and orbital stations with artificial gravity. Of course, there was no technology to create gravity anywhere and at any time, as indeed it is now. In fact, it was proposed to use rotating apparatuses in which centrifugal force pressed the crew and their official and personal property to the surface. Everything seems to be clear. Remember, this is exactly the principle used to create artificial gravity on the Endurance spacecraft in the movie Interstellar. But in fact, everything is not as simple as it seems, because there are other effects besides centrifugal force inside any object rotating around its axis. The most notable of this is the Coriolis force. The force is, of course, fictitious, yes, but this is no less noticeable. The smaller the radius of a rotating space station and the faster it rotates, the more pronounced the effects associated with the Coriolis component would be. Can a person and his inner ear withstand such an impact for a long time? Wouldn't a cure gravity be worse than a disease, zero gravity? Scientists did not know that yet, but they really wanted to know. A strange centrifuge. The house for the subjects, what you can see is from the open sources. This strange house of cosmonauts in the early 1960s, the design bureau of Sergei Pavlovich Korolev commissioned a project for an experimental rotating house. He was the father of the Soviet space program, Korolev, and I have other videos about him that I urge you to see. Well, this was needed to study the effects of a rotating habitat on humans during a flight to Mars. The concept was simple. It was necessary to build a centrifuge similar to those used to test the endurance of cosmonauts and astronauts. Just a little more. It had to be big enough for the volunteers to live inside it, and not for a couple of hours. It's for a long time. The Orbita project, as it was called, was carried out by the Flight Research Institute and the Institute of Biomedical Problems. Initially, the project was called Mars, but later it was decided to change the name so that foreign intelligence agencies would not conclude that the USSR was planning a flight to the Red Planet. The Orbita project was a 20-meter-long double centrifuge. At one end was a circular cabin in which the rotonauts could live. It was designed for two people. The living room was equipped with a bed, a desk, a bathroom, a shower, and a kitchen. The peculiarity of this room was that it could change the angle of inclination to the axis of rotation. This made it possible to adjust to the rotation speed of the system. At low angular speeds, the cabin was in a horizontal position. Rotonauts could enter and exit from the central point of the axis, even when the system was in motion. At the opposite end of the axis was a counterweight and a hanging chair for additional experiments. The composition of the orbit: one cabin, corridor, fixed platform, not rotating, hatch for access to the centrifuge, turntable, ladder, counterweight, central room in the axis, balcony. The Orbita project was built in 1965, and by 1974, 72 people had passed through it. Most of them had the same symptoms. They experienced the same euphoria and joy during the first hour of rotation, and lethargy, weakness, and headaches for the next few hours. Subsequently, most of the subjects managed to adapt more or less to the existing conditions. Numerous experiments have been conducted. The duration of one of them was 35 days. As expected, it took the rotonauts, rotating cosmonauts, several days to fully recover from the ordeal, but no irreversible side effects were found. Unfortunately, today it is difficult to find detailed information about the events that must have taken place on board the Orbita during the experiments. The installation was dismantled in the second half of the 1970s. By that time, there was no need to use it, because it became clear that, firstly, a flight to Mars is not an emergency situation for the human body, and secondly, the effect of weightlessness on the human body is not so dangerous for it, as expected. This became clear thanks to the long-term flights on the Salyut space stations. The construction of rotating space stations had ceased to seriously interest scientists. However, some experiments on this topic continued both in the Soviet Union and the USA. However, no one has ever built such a strange room as the one that was created during the work called the Orbita project, and we still don't know exactly in detail what happened there during the experiments. No full information. So I intend to bring you more interesting stories from the space exploration and the paranormal aspects connected to it as well. If you like my research, please support my research through the links you will find in the description to this channel. Please subscribe to my channel and please hit the notification button. Thank you for your attention to my work.